Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I echo your opening remarks. We are just trying to provide information and encouragement and motivation. And that certainly would describe my talk today. So the real religious jihad on America, folks, it doesn't take much looking, but you do have to look and you do have to focus on what's happening today. So I hope that you'll pay attention to this information that I want to provide you. And Jeff, I do want to tell those who have joined us also that I did a little teaser earlier this week and gave a little snippet of my talk today just to see what kind of reaction I would get. And it was overwhelmingly, I mean, I was blown away by the reaction, in fact, of what I shared earlier this week. So I think that bodes well for what you and JD, Sam, and Pastor Ken are all doing with the American conservative movement. So, folks, we are living in a time of revealing. Christians, conservatives, libertarians, patriots, and other freedom and liberty-minded people, we should take the time to rejoice right now. Now, there are a lot of reasons that we could rejoice, but there's one that I think that we're missing, and it's this. We should rejoice today because the God haters, the America haters, the freedom haters, the liberty haters, in short, the satanic, demonic leftists among us are finally being exposed on a scale and at a depth never before seen in American history. Leftists, Marxists, communists, America haters, God haters of all or no political persuasion, they all have one thing in common. They serve a demonic master who has completely destroyed their innate ability to reason for the common good. I and many others have said for many years that leftist politics, whether Marxism, globalism, it's a mental disorder. We are seeing that truth verified like never before. Governors and mayors all across America who march under the banner of the Democrats and even some Republicans have been doing us a great favor by showing us who they really are. Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Governor Gavin Newsom in California, Andrew Cuomo in New York, Kate Brown in Oregon, Andrew Beshear in Kentucky, Tim Walz in Minnesota, Tony Evers in Wisconsin, and many others have shown that their true allegiance is not to their constituency, is not to the constitutional rights of their state citizens, but it is instead to their utopian vision of all people living as serfs to the all-powerful state. In other words, friends, tyranny. They're busy pontificating in unlawful and unconstitutional ways that are destroying individual freedom and our God-given constitutional rights. The reason that they're doing this is because they've done it before with little to no resistance. These leftists, Marxists, Luciferians, now hiding collectively under the umbrella of Orwellian progressivism, have enjoyed the complete sanctioning of the mockingbird American media. In fact, the American media complex is wholly owned by the Central Intelligence Agency, and its job is to obfuscate truth and tell the TV stations and radio stations and print media exactly what they will and will not print. What comes out in our media is officially sanctioned, carefully crafted disinformation aimed at keeping the dumbed-down American public asleep and coddled at the breast of an ever-increasing federal government that has become, in fact and in practice, an oligarchy. This is tyranny, friends. Americans are being enslaved, and the vast majority don't know it, and they don't care. Today, Christians, not bamboozled by the false doctrine and teaching about subservience to the state as our master, conservatives not beholden to a political party for their voice, and patriots who understand the dire times we live in, are rising up and offering stiff pushback. Americans who understand what the founding fathers bequeathed to us are rising up and saying, no more. Protests are growing and political fallout is on the horizon. And might I say, my wife, my oldest daughter, and two of my grandchildren are in our state capitol as I am speaking with you, protesting what Governor DeWine and the unelected director of our state health, Amy Acton are trying to do to Ohioans. This is more than just talk, folks. We should be encouraged by this. However, we have to maintain our strong opposition to what has embedded itself in our national fabric. Indeed, I believe that we must destroy this progressivism, as it is a disease and a cancer. I'll go that far to say it is a disease and a cancer that will kill us if we don't eradicate it. Now, what you need to know today, friends, is that the leftists, the Marxists, the communists, the progressives in our midst, they have all revealed their religion. They have unfurled their banner, and they are attempting a blitzkrieg across this great nation with one objective: the complete destruction of our freedoms, our liberties, our constitutional rights, and our way of life. We cannot allow them to win this war, and we must aggressively oppose this takeover of America with every available resource we have at our disposal. Some may be skeptical about my belief that the God-haters, the progressives, have a religion. When we take the time to analyze the left's madness, some call it derangement, we see that they all subscribe to a faith. Let me explain. The satanic progressives do not believe that life has any meaning. Thus, they give no thought whatsoever to the wholesale slaughter of unborn children. Their altar is convenience. Their mantra is my body, my choice, and is another way of saying, I want my best life now because nothing comes after this. I want to have sex with whomever, whenever, and not worry about the inconvenience of a baby. Even the worst president in our history, Barack Hussein Obama, admitted that unborn children are a burden and that women should not be burdened by this mistake. He is symbolic of the hatred and wicked indifference to human life. Why do Marxists, why do leftists and progressives treat human life as worthless or at best on par with a plant, a dog, or a frog? Well, they do so because they believe human life is just one variation among many occupying Earth. Their maxim is cogently stated in the silly axiom, from the goo to the zoo to you. You, Mr. or Miss, are nothing more than an accident of time and chance, according to progressivism. In short, evolution is your father and creator. However, human life is sacred. We know that intrinsically. Humans are created as image bearers of our creator. When progressives, leftists, Marxists, and communists show their disdain for the most vulnerable human beings, those in their mother's womb, they're also signaling their intent to destroy human life that does not serve the purpose of advancing the Leviathan's power, and that is the power of the state. This is why progressives advocate for euthanasia as mercy killing, refuse to oppose honor killing among the demonically charged Islamists in our midst, and protect illegal aliens who are known murderers and violent aggressors who daily commit atrocities against American citizens. This is why progressives, leftists, and their supporters refuse to investigate human sex and labor trafficking. Pedophilia is emerging as the progressives' new head of the spear, aimed at normalizing the sexual perversion of those who prey on our children. Progressives and their supporters are modern-day worshipers of Moloch, the Canaanite god that received the sacrifices of human beings of all ages, but especially of children. Modern-day leftists are just as evil as those progenitors. The religion of progressivism, and I will include here progressive Christianity, which is oxymoronic if there ever was such a thing, is politics. But not just mainstream politics, friends. Their religion is woke politics. Woke politics is nothing more than hatred of the Caucasian race. For white liberals, it's self-loathing. For people of color, it is cover for their blatant racism. The goal of woke politics and woke religion is the total destruction of America and the deliberately engineered reconstruction as a progressive utopia where alleged marginalized people of gender and sexual dysphoria People of color, people of apparent practices and beliefs foreign to this and our history will rule and enforce their version of justice upon the majority. If you're white, then you're guilty of crimes against these minority and special interest groups. That is what they believe, and that is what they advocate. If you think I'm exaggerating, then you are deceived and ignorant, willfully or because of slothfulness on your own part. Here's what you need to know about the Trojan horse called critical race theory. Critical race theory has paved the way for special, focused, legalized racism. Most Americans are probably unfamiliar with what critical race theory is. If you have heard the pejoratives systematic oppression, institutional racism, or white privilege, then be aware that those who use these terms to justify their position are using critical race theory. Those who have been deceived by critical race theory believe that racism is a permanent part of American life. It matters not that only they can see it. Racism is in the eyes of the beholder and their opinion. And according to critical race theory, that's enough. Critical race theory rejects the ideals of a colorblind society where merit and equal treatment govern interactions. Instead, critical race theory agitates for aggressive, color-conscious efforts to fundamentally change what critical race theory advocates believe is a white, privileged America. They want to change it into a nation of people of color who replace all perceived white power and privilege structures. Professor Bill Barlow sees the crux of the matter and warns of the danger inherent in CRT, and this is what he says. Critical race theory offers a potent mix, rejecting racial neutrality in the law, rejecting the liberal emphasis on individual rights, rejecting the possibility of objectively neutral legal analysis, and embracing the tools not only of reason, but especially unreason. It is an unusual combination for a theory originating on the far left. If critical race theory were just about affirmative action, perhaps we could let such indulgences slide. But critical race theory not only directs how to structure the university, but also how to structure the relation of the individual to the state. Racially based taxes, racially based employment quotas, racially based redistributions of wealth, none would be beyond the theoretical horizon of critical race theory. All are justified by an appeal to inadequate racial justice, an appeal that can be neither proved nor disproved, an appeal that can just as easily be used for naked racial subordination. All fall within a context where speech labeled as hurtful and racist could be punishable by law, and opponents of the racial regime would be silenced, end quote. Folks, critical race theory has seized our college campuses. It is rabid. It is postmodernism on steroids. Now, some of you may recall that postmodernism stresses the importance of the individual, his or her lived experiences, meaning they are free to create their own reality, regardless of whether or not it is true. In fact, the perception of the individual is an unassailable mountain of truth through which all other experiences must pass. In other words, according to critical race theory, truth as evidenced by reality is a Western construct used to hold back people of color. Therefore, everyone's truth is true for them. And if this sounds like a different shade of relativism, well, you're correct. It is. The difficulty that we encounter today is that the viewpoints of racists utilizing and hiding behind critical race theory in order to propagate their racism and hatred are nearly incontestable. Running roughshod over other people's rights while maintaining the privilege to do so is utter lunacy. Lunacy, codified into law, is tyranny. We're seeing this happen right now in America's classrooms. The 1619 Project is the current effort of critical race theory enthusiasts to revise history about race in America. The effort is aimed to create new claims of never-before-seen racism that the project's advocates claim is deeply embedded in America's core. It's not peer-reviewed, nor has it been vetted for accuracy. It was created by journalists and alleged scholars, but lacks any real credibility outside of the race-baiting leftists that control government education in America. Dr. Carol Swain, a former political science professor, law professor at Vanderbilt University, she's written exclusively and extensively about critical race theory and its devastating effects on liberty, freedom, and public discourse. In an essay titled Critical Race Theory's Destructive Impact on America, Dr. Swain reveals this. Critical race theory is an analytical framework to analyze institutions and culture. Its purpose is to divide the world into white oppressors and non-white victims. Instead of traditional forms of knowledge, it uses personal narratives of marginalized minority victim groups as irrefutable evidence of the dishonesty of their mostly white heterosexual oppressors. The ultimate goal of this theory's proponents is to remake society so that the victim class eventually displaces the oppressors and becomes the new ruling class. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. This is exactly what they are trying to do to us. The demonic nature of critical race theory is apparent. Critical race theory advocates for the godlike status of their perspective. People are not permitted to decry their views because doing so is evidence of racism. When people convince themselves that entire classes of people, the Caucasian or white race in this instance, owes them something because they have developed a perceived experience, then any system of thinking that calls that thinking into question or labels it nonsense is perceived as a threat. Therefore, critical race theory proponents and the numerous militant special interest groups that utilizes and supports it are convinced that any and all resistance, including physical violence, is warranted. You want an explanation for what is happening on our college campuses today? This is it. It's critical race theory. If you want to understand what's going on in American universities, look no further than critical race theory. Now, critical race theory and social justice is one plank of critical race theory. It is at the center of Marxists, leftists, progressive politics, and it is their religion, folks. You need to grasp this, or you won't understand what's happening. Trevor was speaking earlier about Marxism and its strategies. This is one of them. We all know the phrase divide and conquer. That's exactly what they're doing. They're fomenting hatred. They're fomenting anger. They're purposely creating a contrived victim class, all for the express purpose of taking us down as a constitutional nation. Let me continue. Even Attorney General William Barr sees progressivism as a religion. Here's what he said recently. In any age, the so-called progressives treat politics as their religion. Their holy mission is to use the coercive power of the state to remake man and society in their own image, according to an abstract ideal of perfection. Whatever means they use are therefore justified because by definition, they are a virtuous people pursuing a deific end, end quote. Now let me answer the naysayers out there who believe that leftists, Marxists, communists, Democrats, progressives are irreligious. They're not irreligious. They have a religion, and they are faithfully adhering to that religion, folks. There are 4 questions that any religion seeks to answer. Here's what they are. They relate to origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. In other words, where did we come from? What do the progressives say? Well, you came from the goo, to the zoo, to you. You came from the swamp, the primordial soup. Therefore, you have no purpose. There's no meaning to life. If there is any meaning, it's survival of the fittest. That also helps to determine right and wrong. Whatever works, whatever is right or wrong for the individual self, that's what's right and that's what's wrong. And then what happens when you die? The end of life question. Well, progressives, leftists, Marxists say that you cease to exist. And that, folks, when you understand their worldview, this will help you to respond appropriately. Progressives Leftists, Marxists, and Democrats say that human life is expendable. That means there is no supernatural origin, no creator other than Mother Nature. Since life is an accident, there's no significance to it, therefore no meaning to life. Human beings can be sexually abused for the pleasure of their abusers and then discarded when they are no longer useful to that end. Jeffrey Epstein was a monster and a master at this, and he knew many other powerful people who treated other human beings as chattel. He was murdered in solitary confinement because he was going to name names. The enemies of America, such as the Obamas, the Bidens, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, numerous Hollywood stars, the CIA-controlled media, and some Christians who are in full-blown apostasy, believe that might makes right. The enemies of America want to wrest control of government from the hands of sane people who still believe in we the people, that we can govern ourselves, and deliver it to a cadre of technocrats that want to run roughshod over us. The progressives are fighting for victory for their religion, which is state power. Unrelenting coercion by the state. Folks, that's tyranny. But they're doing so because they think they are the virtuous ones. Their worldview makes them believe that they're right, that they're doing what's honorable and just. Here's how Thomas Sowell described them in his book, Vision of the Anointed. He said, the great ideological crusades of 20th century intellectuals have ranged across the most desperate fields, from the eugenics movement of the early decades of the century to environmentalism of the later decades, not to mention the welfare state, socialism, communism, Keynesian economics, and medical, nuclear, and automotive safety. What all of these highly different crusades have in common is their moral exaltation of the anointed above others. That'd be me and you, folks, the flyover people, the great mass of unwashed, the despicables, to quote the Wiccan high priest Hillary Clinton, who are to have their very different views nullified and superseded by the views of the anointed, imposed via the power of government. Despite the great variety of issues in a series of crusading moments among the intelligentsia during the 20th century, several key elements have been common to most of them. And we are witnesses to this right now, folks. Let me give them to you quickly, and I'm wrapping up now. Number one, assertions of a great danger to the whole of society, a danger which the masses of people are oblivious. Can you say Chinese Wuhan coronavirus? 2, an urgent need for action to avert impending catastrophe. You know why everybody's out protesting in their state capitals today? Because they realize finally we've been took. 3, a need for government to drastically curtail the dangerous behavior of the many in response to the prescient conclusions of the few. They know better what we need than we know ourselves. We don't need any more nanny state, dictatorship, tyranny. 4, a disdainful dismissal of arguments to the contrary as either uninformed, irresponsible, or motivated by unworthy purposes. That's why they tell us to sit down and shut up. Don't sit down and shut up, folks. When their agendas fail to deliver on promises, they always respond, well, where would we be if we didn't have these programs in place? How much worse would it have been? In short, no matter what happens, the vision of the anointed always succeeds. If not by the original criteria, then by criteria extemporized later. And if not by empirical criteria, then by criteria sufficiently subjective to escape even the possibility of refutation. Evidence becomes irrelevant. Listen, friends, we must rise up in unison and fight back against these evil people in our government, in our society, in our businesses, and yes, even in some churches who are being led into deception and ultimately hell itself by pastors and ministry leaders under the spirit of the age, which is to say, the spirit of Antichrist. If you're not hearing this in your church, friends, find a church where you are hearing it. This is life or death stuff right now. We've got to stop playing around and get serious about preserving this nation. And we'll do it, at least in my view, for the glory of God. God bless you all. Thank you for joining me for this session of the American Conservative Movement Saving America Conference.